So why can't we get along? If you look at current events, you've got protests and riots, a lot like we had back in the late 60s and 70s. Some of them are getting nasty and mean. We've got all kinds of turmoil going on. We seem to have a government divided against its own self. Parts of the CIA are doing some kind of a counter coup, and some parts of the CIA are standing up for the current administration, and you've got political parties at each other's throats and all kinds of craziness going on. So if you look at international politics, you've got parts of the world that can't get along with other parts of the world, and you just begin to wonder, why can't we get along? There was a Swedish artist that came up with this, coexist logo. That was just wishful thinking. You can't put together people who hate each other and say, let's just get along. The best you might be able to come up with is, let's just agree not to kill each other. But is this a normal state of affairs for humans? Or is this some kind of an artificial construct laid on top of humanity? Well, if you listen to the secular people, the anthropologists, the sociologists, they'll tell you it's a developed part of our nature, and it's become perhaps part of our DNA. Back when we were hunter-gatherers, our family competed for resources with other families and other tribes, so we were against each other. If you listen to the Judeo-Christian people, they'll look at a conflict between good and evil in the heavenlies, which spills out on the earth and is played out on the earth, and God's people have an inherent resistance to the adversary's forces, or the pagan forces, or the dark spiritual forces. And then you've got another way of looking at that is that the pagans are inspired by evil spirits, and they hate all things that are righteous and good and godliness, and evil become labeled as good, and good becomes labeled as evil, and there's just no way to put this together, no way to stop the conflict. So in the long and short of it, is there such a thing as all getting along? Nope. Not possible. But we can come together in such a way as we'll decide that our differences are not bigger than our humanity, because it's worth it for all human beings to get along to the point where we can, at least in spite of our differences, have our families and have our jobs and do our thing and make the earth a better place for each other. So can we all get along? Probably not. Can we decide not to kill each other? Yep, absolutely. To illustrate how much we kind of don't get along, we hang together in our own tribes and families and congregate according to other people, because it's more comfortable to get along with people that think like you rather than people that are completely different. So a map company fed election results from the 2016 election into a topographical map software, so when the percentage was extremely high of people that voted for a candidate, it would show as high hills and mountains in brown, and when it was kind of like evenly distributed, 51, 53% for one and 45, 47% for the other, they would show that as low-lying areas in green. So you can pretty much see that for the Democrat candidate there were many pockets called an archipelago, or I never have figured out how to pronounce that silly word. And they're spread out all over, but they are groups and clumps. And then when you take a look at the voting for Mr. Trump, you see that there's a large landmass, and when you look at it in a topographical map, it's not hard to figure out how Mr. Trump won. However, the large landmass is not nearly as densely populated as the islands. So that's one way you can illustrate how it is that we don't get along together and we clump together with people that have like minds. It kind of proves the secularist idea of hunter-gatherers forming together in bands of tribes and families. So that's one way to illustrate the point, and yeah, we don't get along together so well, but we do tend to stick to people of a like mind. One verse in the New Testament represents pretty much the way Christians think about the entire conflict. It says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood." but against rulers, against authorities, against cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. Ephesians 6:12. That's the essential concept of Christianity about evil. We don't blame the individuals, we blame the spiritual forces that influence them, that push them to act the way they do. So that's a Christian view. You can either buy it or you can sink into nobody can ever get along and it's not possible to survive together. Take your choice. Take the high road or the low road. And until then, live free.